Hello and welcome to the program. I'm your host, Neil Howard, here on Health Professional Radio. Glad that you could join us for another segment. What is acupuncture? How does it work? What does it treat? Well, joining us on the program is Matthew Bauer, president at the Acupuncture Now Foundation. It's a nonprofit organization, and he's joining us to talk about the practice of acupuncture, the foundation, and their mission to bring more accurate and up-to-date information and resources to health professionals and the public as a whole. Welcome to the program. Matthew, how are you?
I'm very well, Neil. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for taking the time this morning. Now, you, of course, are the president at the Acupuncture Now Foundation. I'm going to assume that you are a practicing acupuncturist. Give us a brief background, if you would.
Well, yes, I've been practicing full-time in Southern California now for 34 years. Mm-hmm. And I basically got into this because I had low back problems, and just kind of a series of events led me to eventually learn about acupressure and then acupuncture. Mm-hmm. And I've been really blessed to have had a very steady practice over these years. And I just thought it was absolutely amazing what acupuncture can do, and that somebody needed to be out there really helping people understand it.
Now, most of us have heard of acupuncture. Maybe fewer of us are aware of acupressure.
What I like to tell people about the difference between acupuncture and acupressure is it's kind of like the difference between using a power tool and a hand tool, like in construction or something. The acupuncture is like the power tool. It allows you to get more work done with less effort, whereas acupressure can often do the same or similar jobs, but it tends to take more time and effort. And so people that know both, we tend to rely more on acupuncture because it allows us to get more done with less effort. And then sometimes, like for myself, I start the treatment with acupuncture, then I finish it with a little acupressure or massage-like techniques. And that's like using the hand tool to finish up some of the finer points of a job. But one more thing I would just say about the other difference between acupuncture and acupressure is that in many countries, to practice acupuncture, you have to go through some formal training and maybe even hold, a formal licensing that's regulated as a healthcare professional. In most places around the world, other than in the Far East, doing acupressure is not really a regulated thing that has a strong schooling system. So if somebody goes to an acupuncturist versus an acupressurist, with acupuncture, you're almost always going to be going to a licensed, regulated healthcare professional with standards of training and examination and even continuing education. With acupressure, you may find a great acupressurist that does wonderful things, but it's more of a hit and miss thing there.
So how does acupuncture work?
Well, it works by helping the body to better heal itself. And in one way I like to explain it is often when I'm explaining acupuncture to a prospective patient or when I'm giving talks to groups, people will often ask, is there medicine in your needles? And I always say, no, the medicine is in your body. The needles helps your body to make that medicine. Because your body is constantly struggling to maintain what we call homeostasis, which is basically a balancing act in the body. And any disruption of its natural balancing act can lead to pain and illness. Mm-hmm. But for a variety of reasons, sometimes the body is unable to restore this balance. And with acupuncture, we help the body to better focus on the problem so it can use its resources to better address that. So it's kind of like the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Acupuncture kind of breaks into the system in how the body is constantly monitoring itself, and we try to send signals that we hope will help the brain and the body to better understand the true nature of the problems that are happening so it can make better decisions about how to use the body's resources to address that.
So are you basically using these acupuncture needles like antenna to guide the body's natural healing powers or resources to that particular area by using the needle in that area? Is that what you're doing?
Well, there's really two things. One is, yes, we have the potential to direct it to the area, and that's what really in acupuncture is called local needling, putting the needles in and around an area where there's a problem. But where people really get confused, and quite frankly, it's been a problem for us credibility-wise because it sounds just too bizarre to be legitimate, and that is what we call distal needling. You can put needles in one area of the body and end up helping it in a totally different area of the body. And that sounds bizarre, but one of the examples I like to use for people is a lot of people are familiar with like how on cruise ships especially they'll always have these what they call these seasickness wristbands. And these are these devices that put, it's actually acupressure that do this spot right above the wrist, on the underside of the wrist. Well, that's an acupuncture and acupressure point that's very well known to help nausea. So it could help something like seasickness. Well, it's bizarre. Why would sticking a needle or doing acupressure on this point a couple inches above your wrist crease, why would that do anything to the stomach? But it does, and this is a point that has actually been studied. It's one of the most studied points in acupuncture, acupressure, and it's been proven again and again that yes, needling or stimulating this point in various ways does do something to reduce nausea. So, here is an example of putting a needle in one place that impacts another place. So it sounds bizarre, but it's because the body is all holistically interconnected. There's all sorts of interconnections, and we have trillions of cells, but basically there's a kind of wisdom to how the body monitors and manages itself, and it doesn't monitor and manage itself in a trillion different ways. There's a lot of overlap and interconnections about how the body uses its own innate intelligence to monitor and respond to problems. So sometimes you can put a needle here and it helps the body respond to a problem over there.
Now, we're talking about needles, placing needles. Acupuncture, obviously there are going to be safety and pain questions involved. You mentioned someone talking about is the medicine in the needles. What about pain? What about safety?
Well, pain-wise, it has mainly to do with the size of the needle, especially the thickness of the needle, and then the technique that the acupuncturist uses. Nowadays, and this really started about 50 years ago in Japan, the Japanese pioneered the use of the ultra-fine acupuncture needle. So most of us nowadays have adopted the Japanese thickness needle, which is a super, super thin needle. Like in gauge terms, it's like 36 or less, which there's never been a needle made that thin before because you could never inject any liquid through a needle like that. But these needles are literally about the thickness of a human hair. And most of us have adopted these kind of techniques where we use these super thin needles. We use an insertion technique that's incredibly quick and painless. So most people, I tell people the average sensation of using one of these ultra-thin modern acupuncture needles is roughly about the same and actually less than having a single hair plucked from your head. And about as bad as it gets is maybe like having an eyebrow plucked. Now that's with the thin needles, somewhere between less than a single hair being plucked and maybe an eyebrow being plucked. But some acupuncturists prefer to use the older style needles still, which are thicker, and some do a stronger needling technique. And especially the Chinese, they have a theory about attaining a kind of reaction from the points they call da-chi. So that's a kind of, it's not a pain, but it's a kind of dull, heavy sensation. So, but in trying to get that dull, heavy sensation, sometimes it can cause some pain. So if you ever hear anybody say they went to an acupuncturist, it was painful, I can tell you, 19 out of 20 times that was the thicker needles and doing the stronger needling technique.
Could you give our listeners a place where you can go online and get some more information about acupuncture, acupressure in general, and especially about the Acupuncture Now Foundation and its mission to bring up-to-date and accurate information to the people?
Yes, thank you. Well, yes, everybody's welcome to go to www.acunow.org. That's ACU, just one C in it, ACUNOW, acunow.org. And we have information there on both, kind of frequently asked questions, but also we have a lot of information about acupuncture research there. There's actually a lot of problems with acupuncture research. It tends to underestimate how effective it is. We also have a 30-minute documentary that we're very proud of. We produced that shows an acupuncturist that's been working 15 years at a leading children's hospital here in California. And then we also have search capabilities to find qualified acupuncturists in actually several countries. We have in the USA, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. And we have chapters of the Acupuncture Now Foundation, the ANF. We have Australian chapter and a New Zealand chapter. And the Australian chapter has their own Facebook page. We're working on their website now, but you can find Acupuncture Now Foundation both in the U.S. for the Facebook and then Acupuncture Now Foundation Australia Facebook page.
Great. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us here on the program. Been a pleasure, and I'm hoping we'll talk again.
Thank you very much, Neil.